Well, me now to discuss this topic further is Salim Jahan. He's the director of the Human Development Report Office at the United Nations Development Program and the lead author of the Human Development Report, Beyond GDP Per Capita. That report focuses on people and their opportunities and their choices. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
What key policies and tools are in place to reduce poverty in China, and how have they worked so far?
I think they have worked very well. I mean, we have to look at the numbers not only in the context of China, but China has contributed to more than 70% of the reduction in poverty in developing countries. And we also know that it has been instrumental in achieving the Millennium Development Goal 1. I think on three levels the policies have worked. One is at the macro level. China has taken a multidimensional approach to poverty. It's not only the income poverty they are focusing on, but also the poverty in its all respects of life. Second, I think at the meso level, China has also been very much involved in developing institutions, institutional capabilities, a framework of transparency, accountability at different levels, and that has also made a difference. And third, at the micro level, there have been a lot of projects and programs which are anchored in rural areas, in local levels, but are directed towards improving the lives of people in terms of education, nutrition, access to water, and all kinds of things. I think those three things together have made a dent on poverty in China.
China aims to lift over 10 million people in the rural areas out of poverty within this year and is increasing its funding for poverty alleviation for 2018, as you know. You just gave us some great examples, but tell us about targeted alleviation and how that is helping to achieve these targets.
I think targeted programs work, but I think we shouldn't see the targeted programs in isolation with the macro policies. We know that in China there are some challenges with poverty. One is the whole question of certain groups who are still have been left behind. The proportion of older people in the population is growing up, and as a result, China would need income transfers, social protection policies to help those people. We also know that there are more than 36 million children who are left out with their grandparents in rural areas because their parents come to cities to work, and we have to address those issues. The second challenge is that of urbanization. I mean, we know that 270 million Chinese come to urban cities and work there, have taken part in the industrialization process that have actually contributed to poverty alleviation. But there has to be a balance between the rural and urban development, because as you have just said, that there is still a problem of rural poverty in China. And finally, I think along with poverty reduction, we have to concentrate on relative poverty, which is inequality. And there is a concern both in China and outside of China that with economic growth, there has been a kind of an inequality between urban and rural areas, between the coastal part of China and hinterland. I think inequality or relative poverty, as China grows farther, would be a major issue to take up for policies.
So we understand China's goal of having a moderately prosperous society requires that all the citizens be living above poverty by the year 2020. What more do you feel like the government should do to achieve this?
I think there are three things that can be done. One is to identify the immediate challenges that the country has to address. And some of the immediate challenges, I have already looked into it and I already have identified them. The whole question of, for example, targeted interventions for specific groups, the issue of balance between rural and urban poverty, the issue of inequality. The second thing, I think what needs to be done is to look at the whole question of environmental sustainability, because we all know that climate change would be an issue in China, not only as an environmental issue, but as a development challenge. So therefore, if we want to have sustainable development and also sustainable poverty reduction, the issue of climate change and environmental sustainability has to be at the center of Chinese policies. And finally, I think in terms of institutions as well as the institutional framework, we all know that needs to be strengthened, not only at the central level, but also at the local level. And the whole question of the linkages between the central institutions and the local government and local institutions need to be strengthened. And at the same time, other actors in development, like the private sector, the civil society organizations, have to be brought in as development partners, because development is too big as a challenge to be left to the state only.
Quickly, I just have a few moments left, but what about avoiding corruption in poverty reduction?
I think that's very important, because when we talk about corruption, I mean, there are three things that happen. One is corruption leads to resource leakages, which means that whatever leakage there is there, you don't have the full use of resources. The second thing is that with corruption erodes the institutional framework, because the institutions then break up because of corruptions and the leakages. And the thirdly, when there is corruption, there's also the absence of transparency and accountability. So therefore, given those three things, I think whenever there's a corruption in a particular system, it actually acts as a constraint towards poverty alleviation initiatives.
Well, thank you, Saleem Jahan, Director of the Human Development Report Office at the UNDP. We appreciate your time.